Ranger mentality. Of course, he had Tonto, but primarily the Lone Ranger was what? He was a loner. And consequently, we have bought into this myth that says the key to happiness is independence. If we have relational independence, if we have financial independence, if I just become self-sufficient, life will be good and I'm going to be happy. But that's simply not true. And the rising suicide rate every single year testifies to that fact, doesn't it? Now the Bible, God, teaches that happiness and fulfillment is fostered not by independence, but by interdependence. His teaching is that we need each other. And sometimes we don't realize that, but it's true. We need each other. We need community. That His teaching, God's teaching is that we belong to each other because we are one body, we are one community, we're one neighborhood, if you will, with one last name, and that is beloved. All of us belong to that beloved family, right? Look at Romans chapter 12, verse 5. Let's throw that up on the screen, Rick. By the way, let me say hello to you that are watching by Facebook now and YouTube. So glad that you've joined us this morning. Romans chapter 12, verse 5 says, since we are all one body in Christ, we belong to each other. Now think about that. We belong to each other. And each of us needs all the others. All right? That's a powerful, powerful statement there. And by the way, this need for belonging and not going at life solo was recognized way early. Remember a couple of weeks ago we talked about the creation account and how God, every time He created, said it's good. And He created man and He said it's very good, but God was troubled after that, you remember? And, and He said this is what? When He got troubled, He said what? This is not good. Say that out loud. This is not good. And we discovered that what He said was not good was that man was alone. He saw that that was not going to be in the long term. For the long term, that was not going to be a good thing. And that's still true. Listen, you will never be successful as you could be, as happy as you could be, as blessed if you could be, if you determine to fly solo through life. So today, our series on neighboring, we're going to talk about why we need each other. Or as Mr. Rogers would say, why life is better together as friends. All right? We're all friends in the neighborhood. All right, let me give you 3 things today on your note sheet. Fill these out, will you? Number 1, we need each other because I need you to walk with me. All right? To walk with me. Colossians chapter 2, verse 6 says, just as you have received Christ as your Lord, so walk in Him. Did you know the Bible often compares life that we live here on this earth as a walk or as a journey? Oftentimes the Bible writers describe it that way because life is not static. Life is dynamic. Life is always moving. You don't just sit still in life, do you? You're not where you used to be and you're not where you're going. You are on this journey, all of us on a continual journey. And about this journey, we are encouraged in the New Testament to walk it in wisdom and walk it in love and walk it in light, walk it in the Spirit, walk it as Jesus walked, and all those sort of things. You've heard that, right? But something else you will find in the New Testament as you study, and this is so crucial, is that we are to never walk alone through life. And by the way, this has nothing to do with whether you're single or married. Nothing at all. I know tons of single adults who are very involved in deep, meaningful intimacy and community with other people. While at the same time, I know plenty of married people and people in a relationship who are just desperately lonely. I've counseled them before. I've counseled men and women who said, I'm just so lonely. They've been married for years, but they're lonely. Because and the reason why is because marriage doesn't solve the issue. Community and genuine relationship, a neighborhood, if you will, that kind of intimacy, that's what solves the lonely problem. Now, the argument goes like this, though. Well, what's wrong with walking alone? I mean, I like walking alone. In fact, I prefer it. I can go at my own pace, right? I can go at my own speed. I don't have to wait for anybody, whatever. I like walking alone. Now, believe me, I understand those feelings because I have many of those myself. We're not talking about having, in this study, I'm not talking about having someone at your side day and night. You know that you've got to have someone right there day and night. That's not it. But rather, it is having someone or someones that you can count on and that you can call on as you live your life. Everyone needs that. Whether it's one, two, or a handful, we all do. And let me give you a couple reasons why we need someone to walk with us in life, okay? In that first blank there on your sheet. First of all, is safer when you walk through life with someone else for a multitude of reasons. Have you ever walked through a dark alley at night in an inner city all by yourself? Kind of scary, isn't it? Kind of unnerving. Or have you ever walked down a lonely, dark road? Maybe you had a flat tire or something, and you had to walk down a lonely, dark road all by yourself. That can be scary, right? I had to, we were in Oklahoma last week, and I went some of the places that I lived and hung out and did things, and I went down this one particular road, and it reminded me of the times when, and I've told you some of these stories before, I get it, but it reminded me of, I would play basketball every day after school, and I would have to go to where the parking lot was where all the Phillips Petroleum people, office people parked, and meet my dad. And sometimes I wouldn't get there in time, and he'd leave. And he told me, I'm just leaving. If you're not there, I'm leaving. And I had to walk like 5 miles home. Well, it was this is wintertime, and it had been snowing, and it got dark early, right? And so I missed him, and couldn't find anyone to take me, so I started my trek and started walking. And I got to the last stretch, and it's just this long road, no street lights on it, country road kind of a thing. And so I'm walking down this road, and I'm hearing things. And I'm seeing in the shadows, and there's somebody after me. And I'm running as fast as I can, running. Finally, I slipped, of course, in the snow and the ice, went off into the ditch, and I'm laying there, and I'm thinking, I can't move. And I'm looking, and I can still see him coming after me on the other side of the road. Well, a car comes down this way. And I'm standing up and like, I'm okay, I'm fine. And I'm just walking along, and it's the car. And I look over when the car lights come, and there are cows over here. And these cows are running, and it's the cows that I'm seeing their shadows. But I was so frightened. I was a little 12, 13-year-old kid. Man, I was so frightened about that, right? I don't even know why I told you this story, except that it's safer to walk. It's safer to walk through life with others. If I had a buddy with me walking down that road, everything would have been fine, right? So it's just safer. The second thing, though, it is supportive. Say supportive. When you're doing life with other people, their energy, their vibe, their mojo encourages you. It motivates you to keep on going where you might not have kept going if you had done it all by yourself. Long-distance runners like Spencer, Patty, others of you here. Bruce used to run a lot. They speak about a stitch in their side, a pain, after running for a long period of time that they have to run through. Mine usually hits about the 20-mile marker. Where does yours hit? And look at everybody laughing. You know me too well, don't you? Anywho, the first time or two that happens, I am told that it's very easy for that runner to quit. They're tempted right then, because of the pain, to just stop. And those feelings come, those thoughts come, I can't go on, I can't do this, I have to stop. Great runners, though, continue through that, and then they hit nirvana, and they just float the next 10 miles or whatever. Life's journey is no different than that, is it? Listen, there will be pain, there will be hurt, and when that happens, it's easy to just lay down and quit. I've done it a number of times in my life. It's very easy for that to take place. This eating thing is so hard. This addiction thing is too hard. This exercise thing, it hurts too much. What's the use? Why fight it, right? Those kind of feelings. However, if we have someone there building us up, if we have someone we're walking through life with encouraging us, you can do this. I'm here for you. That energizes you, doesn't it? It energizes you to go on. Look at this. I want to put this on the board. There's an old Zambian proverb, and it says this: when you run alone, you run fast, but when you run together, you run far. Boy, there's some wisdom right there, right? Good words. You see, life is not a 50-yard dash. Life is a marathon. And one of the keys to making it over the long haul is to let others be involved with you along the way. How many of you have seen geese flying in formation? We saw some this week on our trip. You know why they do that? Why they fly in a V formation? Because they can't fly in an S formation. It's a little difficult. No. Okay. Anyway, they fly in a V. They fly. When you see them, you look at them. Each one flies a little, just a little bit above the other one in their V. That results in a reduction of wind resistance. And the birds take turns, as you know, going to the lead bird. The lead bird will fall back, and then another goose will come up, or duck, whatever the flock is, and they will take the lead. And the reason why is because you get tired out there all by yourself. So you got to fall back into the V formation so you can glide more, and it's less stress. In fact, they've also done studies of birds that fly in these formations, and they've done a study on them when they fly alone, when they fly solo. And they found that they beat their wings more frequently, and they have much higher heart rates than when they fly in formation. So the same thing is true for us. We need the encouragement of others, and others need our encouragement. You may think, nobody needs my encouragement, but they do. There are people. Maybe you don't have someone in your life right now who does, but you just hold on. God will make sure someone crosses your pathway that needs that from you. And so everyone needs encouragement of others. Others need our encouragement for flying through life. And let me remind you of a really simple and practical way this can happen. Look in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25. Let us not give up the habit of meeting together. Now notice, this is a habit. This is something they're doing all the time, right? Let us not give up the habit of meeting together. Instead, let us encourage one another. He says you encourage people by regularly and purposefully getting together, being together, spending time that's quality time. And by the way, this verse is not just talking about right now what we do here on Sundays, because while we have community going on here each week, it's not the be-all or the end-all for this kind of community. Many a week, I walk away from here. I thought about it on our trip, and Nancy and I talked about it. There are many, even the size that we are, I walk away here sometimes on a Sunday and realize I didn't really get to talk to everyone. I might have had a back pat or handshake or a hug real quick, but I didn't really get to talk to everyone. And I probably didn't get to encourage everyone who needed it. Probably missed someone that needed to be encouraged, and I could have been that person. Or I missed opportunities to receive encouragement when I needed it. Does that make sense? I think we all do that. In other words, even as sweet as we have it here on Sunday mornings, it can still be a crowd of sorts if we're not careful, rather than a community, rather than a neighborhood. So this verse in Hebrews is speaking directly about a way of life, about like small groups, yes, friends, this neighborhood concept that Mr. Rogers gave us, times of getting together where intimate life can take place. And watch this. Mr. Rogers style neighborhoods are good for you. I want to share this study with you. It came from a TED Talk. Patty gave me a link to a TED Talk, and I watched it, and I spent one afternoon just watching TED Talks. If you've never watched TED Talks, you need to Google that and go there. Some great stuff. But this one man introduced the Harvard study of adult development. Now listen to this. The Harvard study of adult development may be the longest study of adults that's ever been done. For 75 years, they tracked the lives of 724 men year after year, asking about their work, their home, their lives, their health, their relationships. And of course, asking all along the way without knowing how their life stories were going to turn out, because they started, 75 years ago. And this study is still ongoing today. In fact, 60 of the original 724 men are still alive, and they're still participating in the study, and now they're in their 90s, okay? Since 1938, they tracked the lives of two groups of men. One was a group of men who were sophomores at Harvard College. And they all finished college during World War II, and then most of them went off to serve in the war. The second group that they followed was a group of boys from Boston's poorest, most rundown neighborhoods. They chose them for the study specifically because they were from some of the most troubled and disadvantaged families in Boston in the 1930s. Most of them lived in tenements. Many of them lived without running water, certainly without hot water. Now, as they entered the study, all these teenagers were interviewed. They were all given medical exams. Even the parents were interviewed. And then these teenagers grew up into be adults, and they entered all walks of life. Some became factory workers, some became lawyers, bricklayers, doctors. One of them became president of the United States. Some of them developed alcoholism. Some of them developed schizophrenia. Some climbed the social ladder from the bottom all the way to the very top. Some climbed the social ladder in the opposite direction. And guess what they learned over these 75 years? The lessons were not about wealth as they thought it might be, fame as they figured it might be, or about working harder and harder. That's not what they learned. The lessons they learned were about relationships. Relationships always came to the forefront, always rose to the top. And they learned that good relationships keep us happier and healthier. All right? Let me give you two specific things they learned real quick. The first, they learned that relationships, social connections, are really good for us, and that loneliness kills. It turns out the people who are more socially connected to family and friends, to community, are happier, they're physically healthier, and they live longer than the ones who are the loners. In fact, those who live primarily isolated lives were not only less happy, but their health began to decline earlier in life than the others. Their brain functions declined sooner. Dementia was more prevalent in them than the ones who lived in community. And the sad fact is that at any given time, more than 1 in 5 Americans report that they are lonely. Now, in light of that study, think about that. 1 in 5 Americans fit the lonely category. The second lesson they learned is not only the number of friends you have, but it's not about the number of friends you have, and it's not whether you're in a committed relationship. It's the quality of the relationships that you have. All right? It turns out that living in the midst of conflict is really a bad deal. High conflict marriages. We almost had a divorce today coming in the building. No, I'm teasing. I won't say who it was. But high conflict, you know what a high conflict is? Most all of us have been in a high conflict relationship, probably. That's really bad for our health. High conflict marriages, for instance, that don't have a lot of affection, turn out to be so bad for your health that it has worse effects on you than getting divorced. Now think about that one. And living in the midst of the good protective a good warm relationship is protective. Once these men reached their 80s, they wanted to look back, the researchers wanted to look back at them at midlife and see if they could predict who was going to grow into a happy and healthy octogenarian and who wasn't. What they discovered when they looked back, when these men were 50 and now they're 80, but when they were 50, it wasn't their middle-age cholesterol levels and the like that predicted how they were going to grow old. It was how satisfied they were in their relationships. That's what predicted those that were healthy in their 80s. The people who were the most satisfied in their relationships at age 50 were the healthiest people in their 80s. Those who were happily partnered, men and women, reported in their 80s that on days when they had physical pain, their mood still stayed the same in that healthy relationship, even when their bodies screamed, I can't do this anymore. How about that? Isn't that amazing? So anyway, This is why solitary confinement is the worst kind of punishment that you can do to a person when someone's put into solitary confinement, when they're all alone, because we are wired, we are created to belong. So I need others to walk with me, and others need me to walk with them. Number two, we need others to watch out for us. I need you to watch out for me. In other words, we need people to help us stay the course, to have our back, to identify our blind spots. In Philippians chapter 2, it says, look out for one another's interests, not just your own. If you want a verse that's countercultural, that's the verse right there. In the American culture, the general idea is it's all about me. My needs, my interests, my wants, my desires, my ambitions, right? It's like, forget you, I live for myself, I am the one that matters. This verse says, don't do that. Don't just look out for your own interests, look out for others too. It's like those neighborhood watch signs. Does anyone live in a neighborhood that you have a neighborhood watch sign out there when you get ready to go into the neighborhood? Those are signs of community. They're saying, hey, we watch out for one another here. You better watch out, right? We take care of our people here. You better heed that advice. Did you ever go out of town for an extended time? Even just for a week or so, like we did? What are some of the things you do right before you leave? I can tell you one thing that you probably do. If you're going out for an extended time, you probably ask someone to keep an eye on things, a neighbor or something, right? Keep an eye on things for you. You ask them to watch over your stuff. You may even give them a key to your house. You know, when we leave, we have someone that watches the pets and give them a key to the house, that kind of stuff. Here's a great question. More than your stuff, is anyone watching out for your soul? Is there anyone in your life that helps you stay on track spiritually, that you trust enough to take their advice and to pray over it? Is there anybody in your life that loves you enough to say, I'm not going to let you get discouraged. I'm not going to let you drop out. I'm not going to let you give in to being tired. I'm here with you. I'll lift you up. I'm here to support you. And they encourage you in your spiritual life? Do you have someone like that? I so hope you do, because we all have blind spots. We all have things we cannot see about ourselves. We can develop habits or lifestyle changes that we think might be good for us, but there's a blind spot. Someone else looks at it and say, whoa, this may not be the best thing for you. Bro, you need to check this out, right? I had, not long ago, I had a light out, a tail light out of my car. And I don't know how long it had been out, but one day Nancy and I had driven somewhere. She came from work and we had both cars. And as we're driving home, we got home. She was behind me. Of course she's behind me. I'm always going to be in front. So when we got home, she said, baby, do you know you have a tail light out? I said, no. I wouldn't have known that. I wouldn't have gone back there and checked. I'm sure a deputy sheriff would have helped me to understand that. But we need people in our life to tell us things like that, because we can't always see them ourselves. How many of you men need someone to tell you when you're unzipped? And the older you guys get, you younger guys, it's not a big deal. I'll tell you right now, the older you get, this is everyday deal right there. We become like little boys again. Listen, and let me say this: we're friends here. Don't let me go through an entire service unzipped, okay? Just stand up and say, Pastor, I get it. You know, you remember the story I told you about the preacher, my preacher buddy who came and preached in my church? And he was flashy, kind of an evangelist guy, wore polyester leisure suits. He had a lime green sherbet leisure suit on. He'd been over visiting and eating supper with the family. He came in after the music started in the service. We had 2 rows of pews and then center aisle. So he comes and wore cowboy boots with his lime green leisure suit. And he had a black shiny shirt underneath it. You know, he was styling. Big old collar came out over his thing. So he comes walking up there. He gets up on the stage, and I'm sitting down there on the front row, not paying any attention at all, just kind of in the music, you know, kind of stuff. And this woman behind me said, "Oh, Lord God, help him." I thought, what? And she tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Look at your preacher." I look up at this guy, and this is a black shirt with long shirt tail. The shirt tail he was unzipped and the shirt tail was hanging out of his zipper. Think about that for a minute. Put that word picture in there. Maybe when you go to sleep tonight, it's still going to be in your mind. I'm telling you, that's... Anyway, friends don't do that. Friends don't let us have lettuce in our teeth or have a hanger in our nose. Those are blind spots. Help a brother out. Help a sister out. Hebrews 13:1. Look at this. Keep being concerned about each other as the Lord's followers should be. The word keep is significant. It means not just one time. It's the idea of being vigilant. It's the idea of being persistent. It's like our military bases. They have sentries on duty around the military base. Why is that? So that an unseen enemy doesn't come crashing in, right? We have an enemy too. I think obviously we're all aware of that. Satan is our enemy. And he's constantly scheming about ways he can crash our lives. The moment you wake up in the morning, he's already been plotting how he can get you to waste your day, how he can get you to blow it with anger or with worry or fear or guilt or shame or resentment, whatever. And you know what those things are? Those are blind spots. Those are things that you don't readily see yourself. But someone close to you, that good friend of yours, that group of friends with you, will see those things. And that's why we need people around us that we trust, who have our best interests at heart to watch out for us. Don't just let anybody be this kind of person in your life, because some people just love to speak into someone else's life. I've had them come, Pastor, may I speak into your life? And for a long time I said yes. And then I got fed up with it. I'll just be honest with you. I'll get in trouble for saying this, but I had a guy, may I speak into your life? I said, hell no, you can't speak into my life. And I said that in a big formal church, standing in the front. I just came to the end of myself. So be careful. This is people that you've developed community with, that you can trust and that you'll receive what they say. Life is way hard. Don't try to live it alone. Ecclesiastes 4 verse 12 says, a person standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but two can stand back to back and conquer. Three are even better, for a triple braided cord is not easily broken. That's it. We are to watch out for each other's soul. At another church I pastored years ago, a large church, I received some threats in the mail, anonymous letters, things like that, some death threats for the things I happened to be preaching at the time, and had to do with spiritual warfare and Satanism and that kind of stuff. And so they sent these letters to me, but you know what? I never really was frightened. I never feared. And one of the reasons why is because every time I stood up to speak in that church, there were a good number of law enforcement personnel who were out there in that audience who got together and said they were going to protect me. Don't worry. They gave me a vest. I wore a vest for a long time. It's back when I wore suits and stuff. I had to wear a vest. But every place I looked in that auditorium, when I spoke, I could see one of those men. It didn't matter where I turned, the balcony or wherever it was, there was one of those men there. And when I walked any place on that campus, I had a couple of them walking with me, dedicated to watching over me. So I didn't fear. So here's the question. Who's watching out for you? Who's watching out for you for your spiritual welfare? Those who can recognize when you're in a tough time, when you're going through some stuff in your life, and they'll come alongside you and say, you know what, I'm not going to let you get discouraged. I'm with you. I don't know what's going on. You don't even have to tell me what's going on, but I just want you to know I sense something, and I'm here with you. I want to keep you. I don't want you to be depressed. I don't want you to just live in a life of worry. I'm going to be here, or as a group, we're going to be here. Rarely do you see someone with that kind of support fall, at least for long. Watch this, Ecclesiastes 4:10. If one person falls, another can reach out and help. They've got community. They're in the neighborhood. But people who are alone, when they fall, they're in real trouble. How many of you know that's true? Well, I'll tell you that story in a minute. A wolf will not attack an entire herd of sheep, for instance. A wolf will frighten the sheep and run the sheep so as to scatter them until that wolf can separate that one sheep from the flock. And then it will pounce and destroy the sheep. And there are any kind of number of analogies we can use. As Floridians, we know you don't swim all by yourself out in the ocean. On this coast, we got sharks. On that coast, you've got riptides. I mean, we know that. I've never met a single person who doesn't have something in their life that they'd like to change, but have been unable to change. So my encouragement to you is don't fight that kind of stuff alone. You need people. You need those who will walk with you and who will watch over you. And the last thing, just real quickly, I need people to weep with me. And that word weep encompasses a lot, and I talked about this subject 2 weeks ago, so I'm not going to spend but just a minute here. Rick Warren tells this story about a man who died at home in his bed. True story. And no one discovered the body for 2 years. Think about that. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the despair and anguish that might have been in that man's heart as he lay dying alone? I can't even wrap my brain around that. No one should have to die alone. And no one should ever try to live alone. Both of those produce despair. Because all of us, sooner or later, will face that tough and hurtful something that simply cannot be borne alone. And we have to have community at that time. There was this very significant battle in the Old Testament between the Israelites and their enemy, the Amalekites. Moses sent Joshua with the army into the valley to fight against the Amalekites. And Moses went atop an adjacent mountain to watch and to oversee. And the story goes in the Bible that when Moses raised his arms, the battle began, and as long as he had his arms raised, the Israelites prevailed. But when he lowered his arms, the Amalekites prevailed. And so, how many of you know you can't hold your arms up, I don't care how strong you are, forever? I mean, sooner or later, you put your arms out like this, sooner or later, you've got to drop them to your side, right? So what happened? Watch this. In Exodus 17, verse 10, so Joshua fought the Amalekites, and as Moses had ordered, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the hill. As long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning. But whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning. When Moses' hands grew tired, they, Aaron and Hur, took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. Then Aaron and Hur held his hands up, one on one side, one on the other, so that his hands remained steady until sunset. They started at sunrise, and at sunset his hands remained steady. And so Joshua overcame the Amalekite army. Now what happened? As great a figure as Moses was, he could not do that alone. He needed his neighborhood. He needed his friends. And they were there for him. Listen, there will come the time when we will face a rough, tough season. And when that season arrives, we want to make sure that we are prepared. And one way to be prepared is to build a safety net group of supportive friends around you, a neighborhood right now. To have that ongoing right now. That you can care for one another as you move forward in life. Friends who will be there for you and hold you up. Even weep for you if need be. 1 Peter chapter 3. You should be like one big family full of sympathy toward each other. And you don't need 100. You know, you don't. You need just a handful will do it. When you're sick, for instance, you don't want the whole church to visit you. In fact, it'd probably be bad if all of us came to visit you, right? But you do want one or two that'll check on you, maybe even come see you, but at least check on you, call you, text you, and say, hey, I'm praying for you. Is there anything I can do, right? We all need that. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 26, if one member suffers, all suffer together. And that's not just speaking of commiserating with one another. It also speaks to helping the hurt, however you have the opportunity. One day, Mr. Rogers received a letter from a 5-year-old girl. And her name was Katie. And Katie was blind. And she was writing Mr. Rogers because she was worried about his fish. he most always fed fish in an aquarium. And since she couldn't see him feed the fish, she was concerned that he wasn't feeding them, right? 5 years old. But if he was feeding them, she said, or she asked, could you please feed them out loud so that I will know that you're feeding the fish? Her father added a little cryptic note at the end to Katie's letter and said, you know, Mr. Rogers, this really has worried Katie a lot, and she often cries after the show about not hearing if the fish got fed. She's so concerned about your fish. Mr. Rogers wrote back later in his book regarding the letter. He said this, since hearing from Katie, I've tried to remember to mention out loud those times that I'm feeding the fish. Over the years, I've learned so much from children and their families. I'd like to think we've all grown together. Now, here's what happens. He listened to Katie, and he immediately took steps to heal what was hurting her. And for her, that was hurting. That was really a big deal. However, to do that, he had to get down to her level, and he had to change the way he had always done things. Sometimes you being that person in someone else's life, you being that encourager, you being that one who watches for blind spots, you being that one in relationship, sometimes it's very inconvenient for us, but so necessary. However, he got down to her level, he changed the way he had always done things, but through that seemingly small act of love and sacrifice, he was able to bring healing to her little hurting 5-year-old heart. Now, let me wrap this up. Have you all, you know, we're getting ready for winter, believe it or not, in some places in the world, and we always have a big snowstorm. Have you noticed that? Every winter there's something that shuts down the Northeast. Everything can just get shut down up there. Have you been in snow? There's some people in Florida who have never been in snow. Has anyone never been in snow? Okay, we've all been in snow. So you're familiar with snowflakes, right? One snowflake is pretty frail. If one snowflake lands on your nose, lands on your hand, it's gone immediately. But when snowflakes stick together, they have the potential to stop traffic, to close airports, and shut down entire cities, don't they? That togetherness. Listen, we need each other, don't we? We really do. And this week, I want to challenge you, and those of you watching on the internet, I want to challenge you to be on the lookout and to be sensitive for other people, because you may very well encounter someone whose heart is silently screaming out, "Won't you be my neighbor?" Everyone needs a neighbor. And you, I know you'd be a good one for someone. So keep a lookout. All right, let's pray. Thank you, God, for creating us in such a way that others can be a part of our lives. Others can make a difference in our lives, and we can make a difference in their life. I pray for every one of us watching on the internet or right here in this room that we would be sensitive to this week. If we have a need for someone to bring encouragement to us, we would be sensitive to be with those who bring that kind of encouragement, and to realize also that it's not always about us, and what we give away comes back to us. So cause us to be sensitive this week to others that we work with, that we go to school with, that we hang out with, that we see casually, and to be sensitive to them as they may be crying out in their hearts for just because of a need of community and a need of someone to care and to know that someone cares for them. So help us to be known as a church to be that kind of people that just love others wherever they are and whatever situation they're going through, that we're there for them. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Hey, thank you, Internet Church family, and that's what we consider you. So glad that you're here today. Go to our website if you haven't already, newdaychurchbrandon.org. If you'd like to support us financially, you can certainly do that safe and secure on our website. And God willing, we'll be back here next week at the same time, and hope you'll join us again. Okay? God bless. All right, let's receive our offering, and let me make some very important announcements. This is a really busy month for us, and a good busy.